We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Bezam and Aleph and Meseches Pesachim. This is Pesachim Daf 92a. The Mishnah just said in the previous summit, if somebody hears that a relative passed away, that's talking about when you get the news after 30 days. Furthermore, v'hamelaket lo atzamos, somebody who collects the bones. Rashi over here explains, v'chein mishaliktu lo atzmos ave v'imo, the bones of his father or his mother are collected. Amrina b'moed katan, we say in moed katan, misabel alein kol hayom kulo. The halacha is he's in avelus the whole day. V'lo erev ein misabel alein, but in the evening there's no more avelus. The case over here is, let's say they're moving the bones of his father or his mother to a more permanent burial place. So in both of those cases, when they hear the Shmur Rechoka, or when they are Malaket Lo Atzamos, Tovel V'ochel B'kachim. In both of those cases, he can immerse and he can eat kachim. In other words, it's not only Karban Pesach. The previous case in the Mishnah was a case where you could only immerse and have Karban Pesach. It's talking about an onein, but it didn't apply to other kachim. In these cases, it applies even to other kachim. Rashi over here says, Tovel V'ochel B'kachim Lo Erev. He can immerse, he can eat kachim in the evening. Diafilu Yom Gufe Midrabanan, because these cases that we listed here, even during the day, it's only an aninos midrabanan. It's only midrabanan. Hilkach belayla leko aninos. Therefore, in the evening, there's going to be no aninos at all. So that's why in this particular case, or in these particular cases, even kachim, it's okay. And then the Mishnah continues, Ger shenisgayer be'erev Pesach. Let's say you have a ger, someone who converts on erev Pesach. Beis Shammai omrim tovel v'yochel es pischo lo erev. Beis Shammai say he's allowed to immerse and eat the Karban Pesach in the evening. Ubeis Hillel omrim, Beis Hillel say haporesh min ha'orla, one who separates from orla, meaning he converts, he gets a bris milah. Kiporesh min hakever, it's as if he separated from a kever. It's as if he became tameh by a kever, and that's going to be a problem. Rashi says, Kiporesh min hakever, betzarech hazosh shlishi ushvi. He's going to need a 7-day purification process. He's going to need to be sprinkled on the 3rd and the 7th day, etc. So it's going to be a problem to eat Karban Pesach that evening. Gemara says, my timer, what is the reason? Kasavar, because the Mishnah holds Aninos Delaila D'Rabbanan, that when it comes to Aninos in the evening, that is only a halacha midrabbanan. Again, that was the first case of the Mishnah where we were talking about a regular onein. So the halacha, according to the Mishnah, is Aninos Lailas D'Rabbanan, V'gabe Pesach lo hamidu divreim b'makom kares. When it comes to Karban Pesach, which is an issue of kares, the Rabbanan waived their din D'Rabbanan, but gabe kachim. But when it comes to kachim, hamidu divreim b'makom asay. There, the D'Rabbanan stays in place because all that there is really an asay. There's an asay that the person should eat the kachim, but it's not an issue of kares. So there, the Rabbanan stays in its place. And then the Mishnah said, Hashomea al meso v'chulu. It says if a person hears about his relative who died, or melaket lo atzamos. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Melaket lo atzamos can just eat that evening, isn't he? Tameh melaket atzamos haboy hazaz shlishi ushvi. If somebody's collecting the bones of anybody, he's going to be tameh, and he's going to need a 7-day purification process. What do you mean that he can eat that evening kachim? So the Gemara says, Ema sheliktu lo atzamos. You're right. What the Mishnah really meant to say was not that he personally was collecting the bones. It was someone was doing it on his behalf. So he himself wasn't tameh, but he still has this halacha of liktu lo atzamos. He has to be mesabil that day. And then the Gemara continues with the two dots, quoting the Mishnah, Ger shenisgayer v'chulu. So it said if you have a ger who converts, so according to Beis Shammai, he was allowed to eat that evening. According to Beis Hillel, it was a problem. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabba bar Barchana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Machlokes ba'arel nachri. Machlokes over here is when you have an uncircumcised non-Jew. So then Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have this argument whether or not the person can partake of the Karban Pesach. The Beis Hillel savri gezeira shami yitzmo l'shana haba. According to Beis Hillel, the concern is there's a gezeira maybe next year when the person's Jewish, he'll actually be tameh. Now a non-Jew doesn't become tameh. But now, so he's going to think to himself, look, I was tameh, but I was not Jewish. I converted and I was allowed to eat. And so then the next year he's going to actually be tameh and he'll be Jewish. It'll be a real problem. V'yomer, he's going to say, Ishtaked milo tavalti v'echalti. Last year, wasn't I able to just immerse and eat from the Karban Pesach? Achshav nami etzvol v'ochel. Now also I'll immerse and I'll eat from the Karban Pesach. V'lo yada, the guy won't know, Deshtakad and nochri hava, that last year he was a non-Jew when he was mekabel tumah, which means v'lo mekabel tumah. As a non-Jew, he was not mekabel tumah. But Achshav now, Yisrael, he's a Jew, mekabel tumah, he's mekabel tumah. He's not going to realize the distinction. So really what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that the pshat in Beis Hillel, the reason of Beis Hillel is just a gezeira, that the person who converts is not going to realize what's going on. Next year when he's actually Jewish, he's not going to understand the halacha. He'll think he can be lenient in the same fashion. Beis Shammai hold lo gazrin, we don't make such a gezeira. Aval orel Yisrael, but if you have a Yisrael who is a Arel, who's uncircumcised, and Rashi says, Aval Arel Yisrael Shem Yesh Lo Achshav Tumah Hu Nizerba She'af Barei Loso Mekabel Tumah Kashar B'nei Adam. Even somebody who is Jewish who is not circumcised is still Mekabel Tumah. So Lekol Lemigzar Bei Mishum Shana Haba. There's no reason to make such a gezerah. So that's why the Gemara says over here, when it comes to that case, Aval Arel Yisrael, when it comes to an uncircumcised Yisrael, Devrei Hakol Tovel V'Yochel as Pischol Erev. Everybody agrees he can immerse, he can eat his Karban Pesach in the evening. V'lo Gazrin and Arel Yisrael Mishum Arel Nachri. We're not going to make a gezerah on an uncircumcised Yisrael because of an uncircumcised non-Jew. And the Gemara says, Tanya not mihachi. We have a brisa that says this as well. Amar Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Rav Shimon ben Elazar says, Lo nechliku beishamai beisil al Arel Yisrael shetovel v'yochel es pischol erev. Beishamai beisil do not disagree when it comes to an uncircumcised Jew. He can certainly immerse and eat his Karban Pesach in the evening. Al man nechliku. What do they argue about? Al Arel Nachri. They argue about an uncircumcised non-Jew. Shebeishamai omrim tovel v'yochel es pischol erev. Beishamai say he can immerse and eat its Karban Pesach in the evening. Beis Hillel Omer, Beis Hillel say Haporish min Arla, Keporish min Kever. Again, somebody who separates from being uncircumcised is like separating from a grave. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Amar Rava says Arel Hazah v'Izemel. When it comes to all these cases will be explained, but when it comes to an Arel, someone who's uncircumcised, when it comes to Hazah, the sprinkling, when it comes to Izemel is the knife that's used for a bris milah, in those cases, Hamidu Divrein b'makom kares. The Chachamim say that their takana stays in place, even in a situation of kares, they did not remove their gezerah midrabanan. Onain when it comes to an onain, umitzora when it comes to a mitzora, someone with leprosy, ubeis hapras, a beis hapras is somewhere where there's a suffix, maybe there's a grave in that area. So in those cases, lo hamidu divrein b'makom kares. The Rabbanan did not keep their gezerah in place when there was a situation of kares. In other words, they waived their gezerah in those three cases, and the Gemara now elaborates. Arel Hada Amran. First of all, Arel, that's the case that we said earlier, meaning again, Rashi over here says, Hadi Amran de Chazi L'Ursa. Again, the person really, according to Beis Hillel, really could have had the Karban Pesach that evening. Umishum Gezeira Deshana Haba Dechuya Beis Hillel. But what does Beis Hillel say? Beis Hillel says, well, because of next year, when the person is going to be Jewish, he's not going to be he's not going to have converted. Now he's going to have been Jewish the whole year. Beis Hillel say there was a Gezeira and there Hamidu Divrein. The Gezeira holds, and therefore, even though really when he converts that evening, he really could partake midoraisa from the Karban Pesach. But again, Hamidu Divrei, and the Rabbanan said because of Gzeir, we're not going to allow it. Hazah, what is the case of sprinkling? Do Amar Mar, because the master said, Hazah Shavus. When it comes to doing Hazah on Shabbos, that's really a din d'Rabbanan. Ve'eno, it's an Isser d'Rabbanan. Ve'eno doches HaShabbos. And it's not docha Shabbos, and Rashi over here explains, Ve'ena docha Shabbos beperak elu dvarim v'lo avid Pesach u'shvus d'Rabbanan hu. So the case over there is, let's say Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, and so the person needs to do Hazah in order to purify himself, in order to partake in the Karban Pesach. It says that no, since Hazah is an Isser d'Rabbanan, it's a Shvus, therefore he's not allowed to do the Hazah, cannot partake in the Karban Pesach. So that's another situation where we keep the Gezer d'Rabbanan and don't allow this Karban Pesach, even though Karban Pesach is punishable by Kares. Izemel, what's the case of Izemel? Again, that's the knife for a bris milah. The Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Keshem Shem Neviano, so derech Rishas Haravim, just like you're not allowed to carry this Izemel through a Rishas Haravim in order to perform the bris milah, Kach Ein Meviano, so you're also not allowed to carry a derech Gagos, v'derech Chatzeros, v'derech Karfifos. You're not allowed to bring it by way of the roofs, or by way of the courtyards, or by way of the enclosed areas. And Rashi says, "Ein mevino so izemel lemila." You can't bring this izemel for bismillah. Derech hatzeres avagav dereshuyos derabanan. Even though these are just reshuyos midrabanan, it's not an isur doraisa. V'yidcha pischo. And really, Rashi here says, talking about Karban Pesach, it should be nidcha because of Karban Pesach, meaning Shem Yeshlo Zachar Lomul. Let's say he has a male that he needs to give a bris milah to, Ma'akvo, that actually holds him back from Karban Pesach. The Tanya we learned in a brisa, Milas is Zachar v'avodav Ma'akvan es Pesach. The bris milah he has to give for those in his household, males and servants, etc., that holds him back from Karban Pesach. So you really have a kares issue over here. If you're not going to do the bris milah, you're not going to be able to do the Karban Pesach. Kares the Arel Zachar Asher Lo Yimol. Now Rashi says, don't think we're talking here about the Kares. You might have said we're talking about the Kares of Bris Milah. Don't think that. The Milah Dedachia Shabbos Bismana, because Milah is Docha Shabbos Bismana of a Katan Lav Bar Karesu, and a Katan is Lav Bar Kares anyway. So in other words, we're talking about Milah Bismana. Milah Bismana certainly is Docha Shabbos, And what is Mila Bismana? Mila Bismana is talking, of course, about a katan. So there's no kares over there anyway. So in other words, in this brisa, when it says that the Durabanan holds you back from an issue of kares, Rashi says it cannot be talking about the issue of kares by bris milah, because there is no kares by this particular bris milah we're talking about, because it's a katan. Rather, we're talking about the kares of Karban Pesach, because again, if you don't perform bris milah on the people in the household, that would hold someone back from doing Karban Pesach. And yet, nevertheless, the Chachamim said this gezeir that you're not allowed to carry these zemel will be in force, and therefore you won't be able to perform this bris milah that's necessary for Karban Pesach. Onein hadi amran. What about the case of onein? Onein is the case we said before. Rashi says onein aninos laila midrabanan. Again, the evening aninos is only midrabanan. De amran le'el ochel pischol erev. And there we say the Chachamim waive their derabanan, and we say you are in fact allowed to eat the Karban Pesach in the evening. So again, that's the case that we had in our Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Mitzora Mahi, what's the case of Mitzora? The Tanya we learned in a Brisa. Mitzora Shechol Shmini Shalo Be'erev Pesach. Let's say in Mitzora, his 8th day when he's becoming pure falls out on Erev Pesach. V'roa Keri Bo Bayom. And then he sees Keri, he sees a discharge of semen on that day, Bo Bayom, on that very day. So Tovel V'ochel, he's allowed to immerse and he's allowed to eat his Karban Pesach. Amru Chacham, and the Chachamim say, Afa Pisha Tvul Yom Eino Nichnas, even though a Tvul Yom normally cannot enter. We'll see Rashi on that. Zen Nichnas, this guy is allowed to enter. Mutav Yavo Aseh Sheyesh Bo Kares, because it's better that the Aseh which has Kares accompanying it should come along. V'yircha Aseh Shein Bo Kares, and push off an Aseh without Kares. So again, this is an example where the Chachamim did not keep their din d'Rabbanan in force. Rashi over here explains, Mitzora Shatava V'hariv Shimsho B'shvi. So he did his immersion. He waited for the sun to go down on the 7th day. Nichnas b'shmini l'machane leviyah. So the halach is by a mitzora. What he does is he goes to what's called the machane leviyah. What's the machane leviyah? L'shar Nikanor. That's the gate of Nikanor. Shalon eskadesh b'kedushas azara. It doesn't have the kedusha of the azara. It's not like machane shchina. It's called machane leviyah. K'nechsiv b'kra v'hemid hakohen hamitayr so ish hamitayr v'osum lifnei Hashem v'gomer u'v'azara atzma lo haya nichnas. Now he doesn't enter the azara because he's still somewhat tameh. Elamachnis yadav lebohanos. But what he does is he does there's a procedure that's done with his thumbs, and he can put his hands into the azar. That's what's done typically by a mitzora. Lefi she'ein mechusar kippurim nichnas la, because again, someone who's mechusar kippurim, that's the case over here. He's waiting to bring his final carbon, is not supposed to enter the azar. Kedamrinim b'makos, like we say in makos tamei yil rabos tvul yom o tu masabo l'rabos mechusar kippurim shem nichnasu lemikdash chayavin kares. And mechusar kippurim not allowed to enter the Beis Hamikdash, is chayav kares. So normally that's what he would do. He would stand by Shar Nikanor. He would enter to the Machane Leviyah. Now, this particular mitzvah, V'ra Keri Bo Bayom, he saw Keri on that day. V'nidchem in Machane Leviyah. Now, Bal Keri cannot go to Machane Leviyah. Kedamrinim be'elu devarim de Bal Keri mishalei chutz l'shtei machanos. It says a Bal Keri is sent out of the 2 machanos. V'tova l'kiruyav de l'tzarato taval me'asmol. So yesterday he did a tvila for the tzaras. Now he's got to do tvila for being in terms of being a Bal Keri. Afa pisha tvul yom achar de Keri eno nichnas. Now, even though normally a tvul yom after being a Bal Keri cannot enter, so in this particular case, where he is a Baal Keri who does his tefillah, he's a Tvul Yom now, he's waiting for his Tara when the sun goes down, normally that kind of a Baal Keri cannot enter Harabayis. In this case, we allow it. Again, in this case, this guy is allowed right now to enter, again, his thumbs, his hands into the Harabayis. Why do we allow it? Because that's the only way. He's got to finish his purification in terms of Mitzorah. That's the only way he's going to be allowed to eat his Karban Pesach in the evening. Yavo Asay the Pesach sheyesh bo kares. So the Asay of Karban Pesach, which has kares, can come along. V'yircha Asay the Tvul Yom b'Harabayis she'ein bo kares ella be'azara. And it could push off the Asay of a Tvul Yom and Harabayis. There's no kares in that Asay. That's only a kares by the Azara. And then Rashi just continues and points out, V'imisham the machnas yadav la'azara. What about the fact that this guy's a Baal Keri and his hands are going into the Azara? What's with that issue? So b'shchitas kachim parakim alikol v'adamar b'ya b'mixas la'av shma. So the Gemara over there answers in shchitas kachim. One mandamer says just partially entering is not an issue, so just the hands won't be an issue. The fact that he's a Tvul Yom is not going to be an issue, just entering his hands into the Azara. The other opinion says, we know that as far as tzaras is concerned, he certainly can put his hands. That's the regular normal procedure. Even though normally in Mechusar Kippurim it's an issue of kares, yet the pasuk allows it to chsiv lefnei Hashem. That's what we learn out from lefnei Hashem, from the pasuk. So huchalo af l'kiryav. So the Mandamer over there says, even in the fact that he's a balkari as well, we're going to waive that as well, and he can have his hands in there. And the Gemara then continues. V'yomer Rabbi Yochanan says, Devar Torah afilu aseyin bo. The truth is, the way the Brisa phrased it was the asay of kares, meaning the asay of Korban Pesach is docha the asay she'ein bo kares, meaning the asay that a tvul yom should not be entering harabayis. But the truth is, Rabbi Yochanan says it's really not even an asay. It's not an isser asay for the tvul yom to enter. It's really a din d'Rabbanan. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, Vayamod Yehoshaphat bekahal Yehuda of Yerushalayim beveis Hashem lefnei hachatzer hachadasha. It says Yehoshaphat stood in front of the chatzer hachadasha. My chatzer hachadasha, and the drasha was, what is the chatzer hachadasha? Shechitchu bo davar v'yamru tvul yom lo yichanis b'machane leviyah. That was a din d'Rabbanan that a tvul yom cannot enter machane leviyah. So in other words, that's exactly what's happening over here. What's happening over here is the mitzora who becomes a balkari, there's a din d'Rabbanan, he can't go in machane leviyah, and we waive that din d'Rabbanan. Why? Because of the asay which has kares, because of the asay of Korban Pesach. And Rashi over here explains, V'yomer Rabbi Yochanan says, asay she'ein bo kares, to come our Tana de Brisa. When the Tana de Brisa says there's an asay without kares, for him to enter the machane leviyah, lav dafka doesn't really mean that. Tiafilu asayin, but it's not even an asay. B'tzvul yom b'machane leviyah. It's not even an asay. It's not even a violation of an asay for a tzvul yom to go into the machane leviyah. Ela d'Rabbanan hu. It's just a din d'Rabbanan. Ukara d'chavo hashemesh b'machane shchina kamar. The pasuk which says kavo hashemesh was really talking about machane shchina. And again, that's what Rashi addressed before. How can he stick his hands into the machane shchina? How is that possible when he's a tvul yom? And again, that's what Rashi said. Two possibilities. Either it's just bia b'mixas, and therefore that is allowed, bia b'mixas lav shema bia. Or again, as Rashi said, once we allow him as a mitzora to do that, even though that's a problem for a Mechusar Kippurim normally, we also allow it in terms of his balkari. We'll just see one more Rashi over here. Chatzer HaChadash. Again, it said Yehoshaphat stood beveis Hashem in front of the Chatzer HaChadasha. That is harabayis. That's talking about harabayis, machane leviyah. V'kari lo chadashim im nechidesh echitshu v'osifu al kedushaso b'bayov v'yamru tvul yom lo yichanes la. And it's called chadasha. That's what the drush is, because of this new gezerah they made that a tvul yom is not allowed to go into the harabayis. V'achar gamar Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi the davar zechiddush. That's what Rabbi Yochanan learned, that this is a chiddush. V'gabe Pesach, and then as we said by Korban Pesach lo hamidu divreim leisser de balkari milavo. They didn't put this d'Rabbanan in force. They allowed the balkari in. Ela hetiru likanes. They allowed him to enter and to become tar, so he shouldn't be pushed off from Korban Pesach. The Gemara goes to the next case, Beis HaPras. Again, Beis HaPras was the next case where the Rabbanan did not keep their Rabbanan in force. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, V'shavin Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Beis Amud Beis.